Today we will discuss about lead and lag functions in SQL. So guys, lead and lag are very important and very useful SQL window functions, and they are highly essential for doing efficient data analysis. And they are very helpful when preparing ranking, comparing different periods of time, computing running total, moving average, and many more. So you will get more clarity when we go through the slides and also illustrate some practical examples in SQL Management Studio. So let's start. So lead and lag are window functions, as I mentioned in SQL, and they allow to access data from the next or previous row in a result set. So as the name suggests, lead means something forward or next. So lead basically allows to access the data from the next row, and lag allows to access the data from the previous row because lag is something backward or behind. And the main difference is that lead looks at upcoming rows while lag looks at previous rows. And when we use lead, so you should use lead when you want to see what happens next, and lag when you need to review what happened before. And both are helpful for comparing data with nearby rows. Now let's see the syntax of lag first. Then we will move into lead function. So as I mentioned that lag provides data from a previous row in the same result set. And syntax is very important to write the SQL code, and this is the syntax for lag function. Lag, then in double parenthesis we mention the column 1, and this is the name of the column you want to include from the earlier row. Then offset, default value. So this is basically by default it is 1, and offset is basically the number of rows you want to you want to look. So for example it might be the scenario you want दो रो के पीछे क्या है, तीन रो, चार रो. So depending on the requirement you can mention the offset also. However, by default it's 1. So if you don't, so offset is not a mandatory part to mention. If you don't mention anything, by default it will be 1, and you will get data or the data of the row from immediate previous row. Similarly, if there is no value in that particular column row, then by default it will take null. However, you can mention any default value if you want something in place of null. So this is optional value you can ask, you can write in this space here. Then you write over, then in bracket partition by. Again, partition by is not a mandatory part. If you want to group your data into some grouping, you can use partition by. Otherwise, partition by is not a mandatory part, similar to as we have seen in while discussing rank, dense rank, and row number. Then after partition by, you of course need to mention the partition column. But as I mentioned, partition by is not a mandatory clause. Then you need to mention order by column 2. So order by is a mandatory clause, and you need to specify on which column you want to do the sorting. It may be ascending or descending, so it's a mandatory part. So I have already described these parts, but again for your understanding, column 1, this is the name of the column you want to include from the earlier row, because lag syntax is providing the data from the previous row. So you need to provide the name of the column, that which data you want to include from the earlier row. Offset, as I mentioned, by default it's 1, but you can choose as many the data from as many row as you want. So you can mention 2, 3, 4 depending on your data requirement or depending on the analysis that you want to do. By default it's 1. Again, default value. So by default value, for example, if you have chosen say one, say example of first row. Now there is no row prior to that row because that is the first row. So by default in the final output you will see null, but you don't want null in your final result set. So you can mention any default value. For example, you can put 0. If there is nothing, you can ask SQL to give 0 in the final output. So this is what we can mention in default value. And order by, as I mentioned, it's a mandatory when we are using lag or even lead function. The sequence of row must be predictable, otherwise the function is meaningless, of course. However, the order you choose need not be same in the final report. Column 2, as I mentioned, is the column you are using to sequence the row. You can specify more than one column also. So this is about lag syntax. Now see one example of lag. So suppose there are two column in any table known as production schedule. One column is production date, second column is quantity required. And you are interested to know that how much quantities was required 2 days before. For example, if I am sitting today, then I want to know that day before yesterday how much quantity was required that day. So that is a sense of lead lag function that we can compare data from different days. So since we want to compare data from 2 days prior to today, we can use lag function here. And again, this is an additional column that will be created here. So it was not the column in the initial table. So this is how we can write our query: lag, then in the bracket quantity required, comma 2. So this is offset. Here we are mentioning 2 because we want the quantity 2 days before, comma 0. This means that if there is no value 2 days before for a particular row, we want 0 in the final result set, not null. Then over, order by, and production date. So this is the column on which we want to do the sorting, because production date is something we are interested to have order by. As this is the alias or the name of the new column that we are giving 2 days before quantity. And from, then this is the name of the table. So this is our lag syntax example that we have seen here. I hope this makes sense, because we have taken some very practical example that you can also understand. Now let's see lead syntax. It is very similar to lag. There is no difference. It's just that lead provides data from the next row in the same result set. And if we see syntax, this is the syntax: lead, column 1, comma, offset, default value, over, partition by, then the partition column, then order by column 2. Column 1, which is coming in the lead, inside the lead function, this is the column from which you want to access data in the next row. Like in the example we have seen, the quantity required. So I want to know in this example what is the quantity 2 days before. So in my this column, I'm interested to know the quantity. So that's why I am mentioning the quantity required in this. This is what I mean to say here. This is the column from which you want to access data in the next row. Offset, the number of rows forward to look. Again, as we have seen in the lag function, that you can you can retrieve the data from as number of offset as you want, but by default it's one. So you can take an example that when you are analyzing sales data for a particular month, and you want, like for any particular day, you want कि उसके 2 दिन का बाद का डेटा भी आपके नेक्स्ट कॉलम में आपको विजिबल हो. So in that scenario, you can do a offset of 2. That offset of 2 will help you to get the data of 2 days after that date. For example, आपने कोई भी डेट सेलेक्ट करी है, से आज की डेट है फॉर एग्जांपल 11 मई. सो आप 11 मई फॉर एग्जांपल, आज की कोई भी डेट है, आई एम नॉट श्योर ऑफ द डेट, 11 मई है, आप 2 दिन बाद का डेटा चाहते हो, तो you can do a offset of 2. However, if you don't do any offset, the by default you will get data for tomorrow. So this is essentially the usage of offset. Then default value, optional value. Again, this is not mandatory to mention a default value. It's an optional value. And if you don't mention any default value, the by default the answer will be null. If there is no value to return, basically no next row, it will mostly happen in the last row. Over, this clause is part of window function syntax, and you must see it with all the window function. So even when we were discussing rank function, dense rank, row number, and even while we were discussing lag function today, we found that this is a mandatory clause. They used to define the window over which the lead function will operate. Order by column 2. This clause specifies the order in which rows should be processed and determines the next row from which to pull the data. And this is a mandatory clause for lead. This syntax will get the value from the specified column in the next row based on the order by column 2 defined. And if there is no next row, the function will return null. However, you can mention any value you want in the final output instead of null here, default value. So as we have seen in this, we will also see one example. So it's the same example that I have taken for lag. So for a particular month, for example, you are analyzing the data, and you have again two column in the table: production schedule, production date, quantity required, and you want to know how much quantity was required 2 days after a current date. For a current row, you are interested to also know that 2 दिन बाद कितनी क्वांटिटी आपको रिक्वायर्ड थी उस टाइम पे जब का आप डेटा एनालाइज कर रहे हो. So that time you can use this lead function again. This is the value you want to retrieve the data from: quantity required, comma 2, because I am interested 2 days after today, over order by production date. This is my column on which I am interested to do order by. As again, this is very important to name the new column that is being generated: 2 days later quantity from production schedule. So this is the example of lead. I hope you get the clarity. Now we will do one example in the SQL Management Studio. So as usual, like we do, we have created one table in which there are these. Let me run this. So there are these many columns: sales ID, sales date, and quantity. And the name of the table is sales data. Then we have inserted 5 values or 5 rows in this, and if we execute this select star, this is our final output. Now we are interested to know the sales using lag function and lead function. So first we will understand using lag, because in the slides we were doing first lag then lead. So I will first write a code for lag function. First I will write the query. You just see that how I am writing, and then you can appreciate the essence or the importance of writing this way. So I am interested to know sales ID, then I am interested to know sales date, then I am interested to know quantity, and then I am interested to know the new column that I am inserting, which is using lag function, lag. Then I need to mention the column on which I want value. So by default you can see it is showing you the syntax quantity. Then by default you can mention the offset as 1 and a default value as 0. Then over order by then you need to name the column on which you want to do this order by, which is sales data, and you can name this new column as previous day, as previous, or let's first from, and you write the name of table sales date data. So this is my query. Now as a good practice, you should alias this table, and you should name uh, that this column is coming from this table. So s dot, again s dot, then s dot, then similarly you can write even inside the leg function s dot, then order by s dot. So this is my query. If I execute this, this is the output that I am getting. Now we have not given any column name. That's why it is very important that we should name this previous day quantity. If you execute this now, you can see that previous day quantity is coming in the column. And as I mentioned that this 0 is coming here, so if you remove 0 from here, you will, so you can play with these uh, queries to understand everything about these. If you execute now, you can see null. So this is important to understand here, that if you don't mention any default value, then a null will come if there is no previous row. Similarly, you can see that if I remove 1, even then there will be no difference, because by default it takes 1. However, you should when actually you are basically learning phase, you should try to write as much possible as per the syntax, so that you grasp the concept. So I'm writing here like this, and when I execute, this is my output. So if you see 160, 160, then here 190, 190, 175, 175, 230, 230. However, for this row there was no previous row from which this could take data, so it's taking 0 since we have mentioned 0. If we don't mention 0, by default it will take null. So this is lag function. Now we will see lead function. So lead function is exactly similar to lag function. It's just that it will take data from the next row. So I have copy pasted the same query. It's just that lead will come, and the name of this column should be not previous day but next day, because we are using lead function. So if we execute this query, this is the output that you can see. So as we have seen while discussing lead function, that it takes data from the next row. So you can see that this 190 is coming here, this 175 is coming here, this 230 is coming here, this 215 is coming here. So this is about lead function, and this is very useful. For example, there is a sales table similar, and you want to see revenue. Here we are comparing quantity, but for example you want to compare revenue. For example, on this date revenue was this much, and you want to compare revenue, so you need data on side by side. So in that way, this lead and lag functions are very helpful for efficient data analysis. It is very helpful. So this is about lead and lag function. I hope you understood it very clearly, and in case you still have any doubt, you can ask in the comment section, and we will meet you in the next video with some other video with some fantastic concept or problem. So thank you, friends.